the storm that swallowed the sky. Marian Jenkins stood there at the kitchen window, knuckles white as she gripped that old, worn wooden sill. The sky up north had turned a right, unnatural copper brown, the horizon just disappearing beneath a rolling wall of dust, thousands of feet high. It was coming on fast, too dang fast, driving south towards their farm outside Spearman with freight train force. "Tom!" she shouted, her voice thin against the rising wind. "Come! It's coming!" Her husband appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grim as all get out. They'd weathered dust storms before. What farmer in the Texas Panhandle ain't these past few years? But this one was different, you see. This one made the hair on the back of your neck stand right up. "Where's Ajax?" Tom asked, his voice suddenly tense. The name hit Marian like a physical blow. Their son, their 4-year-old boy, with curious eyes and a laugh that could melt the hardest heart. "He was playing by the barn," she whispered, the blood draining from her face. "Said he was going to feed the chickens." Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. Tom was already moving, grabbing a length of rope from a hook by the door. "I'll find him," he said, tying one end around his waist. "You hold the other end. Don't let go, no matter what." Marian nodded, taking the coil of rope with trembling hands. Outside, the wind was picking up, whistling through the cracks in the weathered farmhouse walls. Dust had begun to filter through, a fine layer settling on the worn linoleum. The world outside, well, it was changing faster than a tumbleweed in a tornado. What was a clear April afternoon just a bit ago, about 20 minutes maybe, was now dark as twilight. Air was thick with stuff swirling around, stung my skin something fierce. I squinted, kept that barn in sight as I fought my way ahead. That rope round my waist, it was my lifeline, connecting me to Marian, to the house, to safety. But it wouldn't matter a lick if I couldn't find Ajax. "Ajax!" I called, but the wind just snatched my voice away. "Ajax, answer your daddy." The barn loomed up ahead, that weathered red paint looking dull with all the dust settling. I stumbled once, caught myself, and pressed on. Lungs burned with every breath, that bandana helping a little, but not much. I reached that barn door and heaved it open, slipping inside. It was dark in there, but thankfully, those thick walls blocked some of that wind and dust. "Ajax!" I called again, louder this time. "Son, you in here?" For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, real faint, from the back of the barn. "Daddy?" I nearly collapsed with relief. Moving deeper in, I found my boy crouched behind a stack of hay bales, clutching a small feed sack. The chickens that roamed the yard, they'd all come in here too, huddled together like feathery lumps. "There you are," I said, voice rough. I crouched down, meeting his scared eyes. "You're scared us half to death, son." Inside the farmhouse, Marian counted under her breath, each number a desperate prayer. She did. 47, 48. The rope in her hand stayed taut, moving just a bit as Tom made his way through the yard out yonder. She'd tied her end round a sturdy table leg, keeping both hands free to pull should the need arise. Through the window, she could see nothing now. The dust had plumb swallowed the world, turning day into night. Even the barn, barely 50 yards from the house, had up and disappeared behind that brown curtain. 62? 63? The wind shrieked against the house, rattling the windows and their frames something fierce. Dust seeped through every crack, collecting in drifts along the baseboards. Marian had stuffed wet towels against the door and window frames, but it didn't make a lick of difference. 79, 80... Her heart hammered in her chest. What if Tom couldn't find Ajax? What if the rope broke on her? What if... No, she wouldn't think that way. They'd be just fine. Tom would find their boy. 92, 93. The rope suddenly went slack in her hands. "Tom!" she cried out, panic seizing her. Had he untied it? Had it snapped clean through? Before she could begin pulling, the rope went taut again, jerking hard enough that she stumbled forward a step. "Tom?" she called, hope flaring. 3 sharp tugs on the rope, their signal that he was coming back. He'd found Ajax. Marian started pulling hand over hand, hauling in the rope with a desperate strength. Outside, the storm had reached its full, terrifying fury. Tom fought against that storm with every step he did. The dust was so dang thick he could barely see a foot in front of him. His lungs burned, his eyes stung, and each breath felt like he was inhaling fire. But none of that mattered, no sir. What mattered was that small body pressed against his chest, the trust of his son who depended on him to get him home. That rope round his waist was their only guide. He couldn't see the house anymore, couldn't see nothing but that swirling, suffocating brown, but he could feel Marian pulling him in. Each tug bring them closer to safety. Then Ajax coughed against his chest, a small, frightened sound that tore at Tom's heart. "Almost there, buddy," he rasped, though he doubted his son could hear him over that howling wind. "Almost home." Another step, another tug on the rope. The dust had worked its way under his collar, down his shirt, into his boots. It coated his skin, his hair, filled his ears and nose. He spat, trying to clear his mouth, but it was useless. Ajax was trembling, either from fear or cold, or both. Tom hunched over him more protectively, using his body as a shield against the worst of that storm. One more step, then another. And suddenly, his outstretched hand struck wood, the porch railing. They had made it. "Marian!" he shouted, though his voice was lost in the din. He fumbled his way up the steps, one hand keeping Ajax secure, the other groping blindly for the door. It opened before he reached it, Marian's silhouette showing for a bit before she pulled him inside and slammed the door shut against that ragged storm. The inside of the house was dim and dust-hazed, but compared to the chaos outside, felt like a sanctuary it did. Marian helped Tom to a chair, then carefully took Ajax from his arms. The boy's face was filthy, spite the bandana, his eyelashes crusted with dust, but his eyes were bright and alert as he looked up at his mama. "You're safe now," she whispered, clutching him close, not caring about the dust that transferred from his clothes to hers. "You're safe." Tom slumped in the chair, exhaustion washing over him in waves. His lungs ached with each breath, and he could feel the grit of dust between his teeth. But as he watched his wife cradling their son, relief overshadowed the pain. "Thought I might lose you both," Marian said quietly, meeting his gaze over Ajax's head. Tom shook his head, reaching out to take her hand. "Not today," he replied. "Not to this dust." Outside, the storm continued its assault, the wind battering the small farmhouse with unrelenting fury. But inside, in a kitchen growing steadily more dust-covered, despite their best efforts, a family held each other close and weathered the storm together. Ajax wiggled in his mama's embrace, his voice muffled through the bandana. "Can I take this off now?" Marian smiled through her tears, helping him remove the dust-caked cloth. "Yes, sweetheart? Let's get you cleaned up." As she carried him toward the wash basin in the corner, Ajax looked back at his father. "The chickens will be okay, Daddy?" he asked, worry creasing his small brow. Tom nodded, summoning a smile for his son. "They'll be just fine in the barn. It's good and sturdy." "Like our house?" "That's right," Tom agreed, looking around at the simple farmhouse that had never seemed more precious than it did now. "Like our house." The dust sifted down from the ceiling in thin streams, catching what little light remained. Tomorrow would bring the massive task of cleaning, of digging out, of assessing whatever damage the storm had wrought. But tonight, they were together and safe. In the Texas Panhandle of 1935, with the land parched by drought and the economy crushed by depression, that was no small blessing. Marian caught Tom's eye again as she wiped Ajax's face with a damp cloth, and in her gaze he read the same thought. They would endure this as they had endured everything else. Together, outside, the Black Sunday storm, one of the worst dust storms in American history, continued its devastating path across the Great Plains. But within the walls of one small farmhouse outside Spearman, Texas, the darkness could not penetrate the light of family found and saved. Hey, friend, thank you so much for listening to this story. Whether you're driving or unwinding with a dog or cat on your lap and a cup of tea or coffee, if this warmed your heart, would you be so kind as to hit the like button and subscribe for more short story content? Thank you so much.